I am going to call up our guest speaker. He's on a tight time schedule. And so Malik Yoba. I said Malik Yoba is a Hollywood veteran and community and youth advocate. He is a serial entrepreneur, as well as a founder and CEO of Yoba Development. The emerging real estate developer has projects in New York City, Baltimore, currently in post-production for his education docu-series, The Real Estate Mixtape, Volume 1. I Build New York. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, would you welcome with me this afternoon the eminent, the prominent Malik Yoba.
Who wants me to sit in their lap? Hold on. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is a wonderful gathering and a wonderful intention. Sir, you look so much like Clarence Avant, it is scary. Not you, do you know who Clarence Avant is? Yes, sir. The Black Godfather? Great Clarence Avant, Jesus. So I'm not gonna be long. I'm sorry, hello everyone, sorry to give you my back. I have a pretty busy day, as we all do, but I'm happy to be here. So my name is Malik Yoba. Some of you may know me from movies and TV. What you may not know is I grew up in the rubble in the South Bronx and Harlem, born in 1967. And in New York, I was always disturbed by what I saw around me. Dope fiends, drug addicts, pimps. First time I had a gun put to my head, I was 12. I saw someone get shot around that time. New York was not a kind place for us growing up. At that time, I didn't understand redlining policy. I didn't understand deliberate effort by our government to keep us marginalized and out of the conversations around economic development and upward mobility. My parents had the wisdom to make sure that we went to schools in neighborhoods that the education was funded, which meant that I had to go to school on the Upper West Side or Upper East Side of Manhattan versus Harlem, where I was living. And so I was always dreaming about becoming a billionaire as a little kid, to put buildings in the empty lots that I saw in my neighborhood. I didn't know that that was called development. I just knew that my friends that lived, like I had a friend whose grandfather lived in a Park 5 on Central Park at Fifth Avenue. That was the first time I went to an apartment that opened up, the elevator opened up onto the apartment, and there was a grand piano in the living room. And then he worked at the GM building and he had the views of Central Park. I didn't understand why they had that and we didn't have what I had. At that time, as a teenager, I was also a BMXer. And there was no place to ride my bike. And so the first development deal I tried to do, I was 17 years old. I didn't know it was called development. I just knew we should have a BMX track in Central Park. And he indulged this 17-year-old with a vision. I said, you got 444 acres, I only need 4. I had done all my due diligence. I didn't know it was called due diligence at the time. I just thought it was called research. And I said, hey, I think we could build this. And he looked at me, he nodded his head, and he said, absolutely not. It will never happen. And so I was a kid with a lot of dreams. I did dream about being on stage, not necessarily television or film, but at that time we did have theater programs in schools. I was part of the Metropolitan Opera Children's Theater Guild at 13, where they went around New York City, identified talented kids, and gave us an opportunity, gave us a seat at the table to write, produce, direct, make costumes, make lighting, and present these productions. So the connective tissue for me around arts and business and community development was that sort of groundwork was laid when I was a very young person. And so my film career started as a result of me working at a place called the City Kids Foundation. City Kids Foundation gave me a seat at the table as a 19-year-old, where I got to learn about organizing community, organizing young people around New York City, around things that were important and would impact our lives, and giving agency. At 20, I was working in 13 high schools. around New York City through a program called the AIDP program, which is Attendance Improvement Dropout Prevention. And our job was to go into the schools to assess from students what they needed to stay in school and be encouraged, right? Not the other way around, where adults telling kids what to do, but the kids, so you do that math. I wasn't much older than the young folks I was serving. And so, working at the City Kids Foundation, I had an opportunity to learn about an audition one day, and that led to my career. This is a very short version. All of this will be in a book I'm currently writing. You can buy it when it comes out or buy the audio. But I'm trying to truncate my life story. So, working in community, working with young people, having the opportunity to transition to work in film and television, particularly a show like New York Undercover, I learned a lot. If you remember that time in the 90s when we were shooting in Harlem, pre-gentrification, pre-brownstones going for $1, I wish I knew what I knew now, because I would have bought blocks of Harlem. But my bougie behind was so quick to want to get out the hood. Nah, I got to live in a doorman building on Central Park like my friends where I grew up. And so that's the first, not mistake I made, because I did well with that investment, but it taught me a lot about what I didn't know. And so while on the set of New York Undercover, I met a gentleman by the name of Dan Bythwood. Some of you might know Labate Development. His cousin Reggie was a writer on New York Undercover. And Dan grew to be a real estate developer. And in 2007, while I was raising, we were reintroduced. And I said to him, hey man, I've always wanted to learn real estate development. He said, well, if you want to learn, come have a seat at the table. So he invited me down to Baltimore, where he had bought 14 acres on the west side of Baltimore, with the vision as a 33-year-old from New York. His father, Dan Sr., understood the value of black folks working together. He came from a family that co-invested with other black folks in Long Island. In fact, in the 80s, they had a Learjet charter company, black men, renting these jets to NBC and companies like that. So Dan grew up understanding, hey brother, come have a seat at the table. And from day one, took me in to meet with the mayor, took me to meet with the city council, all the folks that I needed to know on the political side would take me. I began to be an apprentice and learn this game. And I said, you know what? We got to tell these stories. People need to know what I'm learning. So working in community, working in film and television, fast forward to, well, that was 2007, we did that. The journey to do Baltimore was crazy, because all the reasons we might think Baltimore is a difficult place are all the reasons why it's incredibly challenging to develop. But I kept my seat at the table with him. We weren't able to put a shovel into the ground until 2017. Two buildings opened up in 2019. I got to be an investor and a partner in the deal. I got to bring other people into the deal, and I got to learn a lot. I got to see 2 buildings grow up in the hood, where folks used to sell their drugs and kill each other. And we got to see property values go from $5,000 to $270,000. We got to build 262 Class A units and it's 80-20, so the 20% affordable. There's no distinction between the 80% that are market rate. Everyone gets to feel good. In fact, this jacket, Yoba Development, I have one of our residents produce this for me. There are 3 residents that started a business together in the building. There's a mother and son. We gave them a couple that's running 20 units. They're running their Airbnb business out of the building. And so just a microcosm in this one development called Center West Baltimore gives a great example of the intention and what can manifest from doing this conference. What happens and move a lot quicker than we move individually. Amen. Amen. So fast forward to 2018, just across the Brooklyn Navy Yard, I was shooting the show called God Friended Me. Some of you might remember the show with Joe Morton I was playing a Harlem real estate developer, developing affordable housing with the church. I literally, so I got the script, and I got goosebumps under this. You can't see it, but he's here, y'all. Y'all know what this is. My whole body right now. So 2018, I got that. So the script shows up, I start reading it, and literally, my character is saying all the things that I was just talking about. The importance of having a seat at the table, the importance of equity, the importance of us. Are you falling asleep? You close your eyes because you're emotional. You wish me, baby. We laughing with you, sir, not at you. So I'm doing God Friended Me. I'm reading God Friended Me, and literally, I see you, God. Really? Truly. Like, I see you. Just like when I was doing Why Did I Get Married, I was going through a divorce, but that's another story. True story. And by Why Did I Get Married 2, I was divorced. Life imitating art, imitating life. And so 2018, I'm doing the show, and we're filming right here at Steiner Studios. And a friend of mine, some of you know if you're in real estate development, Scott Reckler, RXR Realty. Scott and I were on the board of the Center for Social Innovation. We spent about 6 or 7 years on the board, and I would never talk to him about real estate. But I knew at one point I would. So I'm shooting the show. I'm looking at the hall, which he has right in this neighborhood, the entire street from Flushing to Park, Hall, and Ryerson. I'm looking at Fort Greene projects down the block, thinking about Farragut right across the street here. And I'm thinking about how many of us walk by film sets and construction sites and have no idea about either business. Yes, we may know a construction worker or a realtor. Yes, we may know an actor, but most of us don't know the people who are financing the deals, people who are in construction, same trades, on the film sets and in real estate. And I'm thinking about, I'm in both of these worlds. And so the idea hit me, I wanted to bring my 3 passions together: real estate, filmmaking, and young people. Out of that came, actually, I shared the idea with 3 women that were trying to start a foundation with me. And I said, nah, I come from the nonprofit world. I have a for-profit company called Yoba Development. I haven't done much with it yet. And I said, I want to be a corporation with the same intention of doing well and doing good, but we gotta be about that money. Because the same effort we take to get grants and ask for support and fundraisers, we gotta do the same thing when we're raising money, whether it's debt or equity. Amen. And so for me, I shared the vision. And one of the women came back 2 days later with a deck, and she said, this is your idea. And it was called I Build New York. I was like, word? Intention, which was a deck. I said, girl, you done manifested my idea. She's now my chief of staff. So I took that idea to Scott Reckler. I said, Scott, I got this idea. I want to help diversify the real estate development game, and this is how I want to do it. I want to start with the babies. And he goes, that's a great idea. We've been trying to figure out a way to diversify this industry. We think the MWBE 30% set aside is a broken system because so many of us don't have the capacity to play at that level when he's doing jobs like JFK Airport or LaGuardia, right? And so he goes, I'll fund it. I said, word? Okay. So now I thought I was gonna do some sort of summer program with the young folk. I was like, I'm gonna do a documentary. I love Anthony Bourdain. I love the style of filmmaking like Parts Unknown. I said, I'm gonna take a trip across New York, and I'm gonna take young people with me, and I'm gonna show them how you can manifest. God and Google can get you real far. The fact of the, listen, and podcasts, Stanford has podcasts, and you can, every time I listen to the Stanford Entrepreneurial Podcast, I feel like I'm like stealing from all them kids that spend all that money to go to Stanford. But the reality is, if we are intentional, and if we move even when we're fearful, if we move even when we don't know,
that's right.
And you just continue to move in the direction of the vision that you were given, you will see things manifest that you could never understand unless you move. And so, I literally collected young folk from around the city. Most of them I did not know. 2 of them were my mentees. One used to hang out on film sets with me anytime I shot in New York. She's a nurse in New York, and she wanted to learn the film business. I'm like, whenever I'm working, just come hang out. Another was a young man I knew from a nonprofit that my ex-girlfriend used to be on the board of. And this young man is now in Pratt. But he was a 17-year-old high school student with ambitions to be an architect. And his design work was bananas. And I'm like, yo, you're coming with me. And the other young folks, one young man was literally a busboy in a restaurant. And he saw me, and he asked his coworker, yo, that's Malik Yoba. I know him. I took a picture with him on my block in Harlem. Let me drop the ticket. So he comes up to me, he goes, yo, I'm an actor, I'm a rapper, I make movies, I'm from Harlem, I took a picture with you, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at him, nappy head, tattoos, beautiful. I said, this kid is perfect for what I'm doing. He had no idea what I was up to. And I said, he goes, oh, yeah, I know Philip Payton. Y'all know who Philip Payton is? Philip Payton was the first black developer in New York in 1904. From 1904 to 1908, Philip Payton is a man who worked for a white-owned company when they were trying to bring folks from the South Street Seaport area into these newly built brownstones in Harlem that were done for German immigrants. Seaport area, encouraged black folks to move uptown. Yes, we were in Seneca Village, some of us, but most of us were not, right? But Philip Payton was that dude. His business ran from 1904 to 1908. He's the person that kind of set the stage for the Harlem Renaissance. This young man in Harlem knew about this kid. I'm like, yo, how you know about Philip Payton? He said, I was doing research on Bumpy Johnson, and I found out. He said, I was like, yo, you. His name is Von Thorpe. He became the star of my documentary. And he's my little brother, and we are working on all kinds of stuff together. So I take these 7 young people from the Hamptons to Newburgh, and I introduce them to the world of real estate development. And they got to meet politicians, developers, people in finance, people, engineers, construction workers, you name it, interior designers. They got exposed, and as we're filming, I'm watching their lives transform in real time. Suddenly, my initial idea of me following me doing my deal became a lot less interesting. What was more interesting is watching their transformation in real time. And so, as the editor of this content, in that process, every opportunity that I have to push them forward in the narrative, because they represent the average person that knows nothing about the built environment and how it comes to be. So I'm gonna sort of end with this. That is in community strictly. It is not for streaming, it is not for television, because I work in that business, and I'm not trying to have some fool telling me my stuff is canceled. That cannot happen. So what I have dutifully and intentionally done is built partnerships with Department of Education, Department of Youth and Community Development, got a fellowship with Pratt Undergraduate School of Architecture, working with organizations. I see Bridge Street Development Corporation. We met a few months ago. I sat in their office and say, hey, this is what we're doing. You have young people that you work with between 18 and 24, 16 and 24. You have worked for a curriculum that can do that and expose these young people. One of the most gangster things that we've done, and I don't take the credit, but there's a high school right on Brooklyn Navy Yard called the Brooklyn Steam Center. Has anyone been there? The Brooklyn Steam Center is in the 77 on the 3rd floor. The principal is a young brother, 37-year-old named Keon Price. And Keon had a vision as a kid who went to Thomas Edison, Jamaican immigrant at 11 years old. By 20, he bought his first property. He studied engineering in high school. And when Eric Adams was the borough president, he had a 10-minute conversation with Eric to say, listen, we need a place in New York where young people could study STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so Eric was like, I heard Eric put down the first $2 million. It's a $17 million build out in the space very similar to this that services 8 high schools from Crown Heights, Bushwick, Clinton Hill, Bed-Stuy, and Brownsville. And so we're running next semester in the spring, we're running our pilot education program for these 8 high schools in New York. And we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna get the kids from your program, whether it's gonna be after school or on the weekends, certainly the summertime, but we're doing that in real time right now. And I just picked up a development site in Bed-Stuy. We're going to allow the young folks that participate in our education program to invest in that property with their families and with the community. And so when I talk to our mayor and I talk to our chancellor, who happen to be my brothers, I say, listen, what I really am concerned about is that we all get wins together. In the history of America, I have never seen young folks at a high school level, number one, learn real estate development. Certainly not in this city. I know Detroit has a program that's starting, I think Philly's trying to do one, but they certainly aren't doing it the way we're doing it. And to have opportunity for the young people in a neighborhood where folks are feeling displaced is an incredible part of the narrative. Somebody tap her on her shoulder. You okay, sis? I'm putting you to sleep. You tired, baby? What you need? Somebody give her a coffee, a strong black coffee. It's all right, baby. We all tired. I get you. I got about leave, but we'll be, I know some folks up here. But that's what I'm up to. And this is the legacy work. Yes, you're going to continue to see me in film and television. Equalizer is on The Good Nurse on Netflix right now. I just wrote a pilot. It's called The Lords of Brooklyn. And it's set in the world of real estate development in New York City. It's The Wire meets Billions. And we're introduced to this world through the least of us. Dudes, returning citizens, living in Brownsville, working as non-union laborers that take the audience through this labyrinth called real estate development, particularly in a city like New York, because the storytelling is important. And Yoba Development, builder of people, places, and things, we exist. I was able to bring my 3 passions together. I am so excited because I literally feel like I float through the world right now because, again, when that download comes, we got to show up for that. I don't care if you don't have the resources. I don't care if you don't have the education. I don't care if you don't know anybody in the business. I don't care what field you're in. That is divine providence. And as people of color and marginalized people, we are the ones that we've been waiting for, number one. And we are the ones who have to remember the first real estate we own is in our minds. And that is the first place that we have to invest. Google and God is a real thing. Investopedia is a real thing. Any term that you hear that you don't know, Google it. Ask the questions. Move in the direction of the intention and the inspiration. And when we do these things collectively, we will scale and grow at a rate we could never imagine. Reverend for sure. We spoke on our Zoom recently about Leon Sullivan. Leon Sullivan wrote a book called Build, Brother, Build. And it was published the year I was born in 1967. Leon Sullivan grew up in rural Virginia with no TV, no radio, used to go into the woods and imagine life. And everything that Pastor Dillon and the collective of pastors here are intending We've done this before. And so if we don't invest in the babies and teach the babies what we know, there will always be that not if we aren't serious about doing God's work. That is all I have today. It is so good to see you beautiful people. Sorry for my back all day. I hope to hear more. Y'all tape this, let me see it, let me hear it. But I'd like to hear what the rest of these beautiful folks had to say. And God bless you. Thank you for your time. And 465 Hancock is the location of our development. Oh, and the other part about the doc series, what that led to is the redevelopment of the Bronx Letters School at 338 Morris Avenue in South Bronx. Kirk, if anybody knows Monadnock Development and Construction, if you know Kirk Goodrich, that's our partner on that. Kirk and I, 1,300 units of affordable housing, and we will bring a steam South Bronx as well. Excellent. And that's what we're up to. God bless you. See you Sunday night on The Equalizer. Yes, Bronzeville. I wanted to shoot there, but we ran out of time. But how could that connect? Okay, we can do it. Yes. Okay. You know how? I'll have to find you. Maybe so. Okay, you can, please? Okay. Thank you. Okay, all right. Thank you.
Let's give it up again for Malik Yoba. Talk about a tough act to follow. All right, we're gonna let those who try to get the selfie in there. But while that's going on, just to keep things moving forward, my name is Gregory Anderson, and I have been honored and blessed to serve as president and CEO of Bridge Street Development Corporation. We do a lot at Bridge Street, but focusing on the topic of discussion at Bridge Street Development, we've developed over 600 units of affordable housing, primarily in Bedford-Stuyvesant and Central Brooklyn. We currently own 400 units of affordable housing. We've developed in primarily Bedford-Stuyvesant, and this goes back over 20 years, that were made available and affordable for home ownership for people of color in our community. So there's a lot that we've done, but there's so much more that needs to get done. And so our panel here today, the topic is navigating the real estate development landscape. That's topic one. And two is the opportunities for Black developers, profit and nonprofit. We have a great panel here who are engaged in various aspects of development, from construction to finance. And so what I'm going to ask each of them to do is talk about who they are, the organization they're with, and what they do within the landscape of real estate development. And I really would like to road. You know, how much of it is smooth sailing and how much of it is the storms at sea. And so really so that we can get an understanding of what we need to do more, to make more affordable housing available, and particularly in our communities, increase home ownership opportunities. So, and talk about navigating a landscape and changing a landscape. Clearly, real estate development, like so many other things, have not only excluded people of color, but have so often been known as a man's world. So I'm really honored and privileged to introduce as our first speaker here, Ericka Keller of Brisa Builders. And I'll let her tell you about Brisa and all that they do.
And chairperson of Brisa Builders Corporation. And in 2016, I founded my own company, Brisa Builders Development, LLC, which is an affiliate of the parent organization that was started by my father and my stepmother in 1997. So I have goosebumps standing up here right now listening to Malik and what he spoke about, because it is so true. I was a principal, right, of an elementary school when my stepmother passed away suddenly, and she had been involved in this business, and I had to make a decision as to whether to keep going in my career or to get involved in the family business that I had not been involved in for 20 years. And a guidance counselor came in and said to me, you know, she knew what was happening with my stepmother because she had visited the school and such. And she said, you know, my family had a construction company and we had all grown up and, you know, became doctors and teachers and lawyers, and no one was there to take over the family business when my father passed away. And I said, that's God, right? That's God talking to me through this woman. And I decided to leave my career and take over the family business of construction and development. And in the last 10 years, sitting in this seat, I have had so many experiences where people didn't recognize that I was the developer because I didn't look like what they expected the developer to look like. And in fact, we are the developers of Bishop Nelson's project, and he will share a little bit about that experience and that journey. But when we were interviewing architects for that job, I was the first one to arrive, and I decided to take a seat. And after 20 minutes, I was wondering what was going on and what happened. And I heard the architect say, well, is the developer going to show up? They did not know or did not think that I don't know who they thought I was. Maybe, I don't know. But they did not was a developer, and they were waiting 20 minutes, half an hour for me to arrive when I had been there the whole time. And that has happened time and time and time again in different situations. And I thought about, why aren't there Black women, Latino women, people of color in this industry? Because most of the housing that are going up are for people that look like us. The experiences I was having now, sitting at the table, I said, something has to be done about this. Like, we have to change this narrative going forward. It cannot consistently be the same old, same old. And so I had goosebumps as Malik was talking, because right before the pandemic, an architect who works for me, who I had shared that story about what had happened to me and before, and was very empathetic, he said, you know, New York City has a program called Imagine Me Schools, and they're looking for people to come up with ideas, proposing schools in inner city neighborhoods, and neighborhoods that have not had high schools. And the neighborhood I grew up in Brownsville, 20 years ago, because they decided to build a prison instead of a high school, right? And so I said, wow, this is a great idea. Let's find out about it. And so a group of my colleagues, architects, the environmental consultant, we all gathered together and we proposed a school to New York City Department of Education entitled Our Space for the Built Environment. And the SPACE was an acronym for School of Property Management, Architecture, Construction, and Engineering, which are areas that we don't see people of color in. And we were competing in 2023, and what happened was the pandemic. And so the funding source was lost, and the funding source was coming from an organization in Baltimore. So, you know, God, I'm just hearing, as I'm listening to his story and I'm hearing the different pieces. And so the program died. It's always been an idea that we continue to hold and have, and I've had conversation continuously with my colleagues. And just recently, I was at a fundraiser, and I was sitting next to the chancellor. And I said to him, you know, we were talking, everyone introduced themselves. We had proposed a school. This is worth of high schools. And the whole thing about me transferring from a principal to a real estate developer. And he said, I love that idea. And just Thursday, I got a call from the New York City Department of Education. And they said, we want to have a conversation with you. We understand that you were talking with the chancellor. He's shared this information with us. We've taken, so apologies for the time that we've taken to reach out to you, but we'd like to have a conversation with you to find out more about this idea and how we can expand or look into creating this school. So God, right? Yeah. That is God. And to hear that that work is happening from other people, and we don't know, right? We're definitely going to be a need for us to reach out to Malik and continue this conversation. And we're thankful to Reverend Dillon for creating these opportunities where we can find out what is happening and work together collaboratively and get the job done that needs to be done for our people. So that's been very long. I apologize. But I felt like I had to share that story because what he was saying and the momentum that is happening, obviously, across this city and across this nation as we begin to stay woke about what we need to do. So all of that to say, I am currently a real estate developer, former principal, and we are a family-owned business. We focus primarily on affordable housing in New York City, and now we are working in the New England area. We try to target those cities that have re-gentrified and are not allowing for the people who have been there when it wasn't so great to live there to now experience all the benefits that are happening in the community, right? And so we are working in New York City. That is our base, Brooklyn. We worked in the other boroughs. We're working in Rhode Island, Maine, and also Massachusetts to develop affordable housing. And it is so very important that we understand the context of affordable and what does that really mean for us to build wealth so that we can own homes and own real estate and own property and not just be renters, right? And what is the commitment to buying and investing, and how can we create affordable housing programs that are home ownership as opposed to just rentals, and how do we look at this differently? Because it's great to have that as a stepping stone, but we have to begin to teach that that is in fact a stepping stone and is a basis by which we can continue to grow and build wealth within the community. So that's what we do. I'm going to turn the mic back over to Dr. Russell, who will introduce the other panelists, and I thank you for listening.
But let me tell you why I'm here, because you see in the program it says Dr. J. Loren Russell. I'm Reverend Dr. J. Loren Russell, and I come from a little different background. My company, JLR Company and J. Loren R. Consulting, LLC, we do loans and we work with churches. So we help churches to navigate this field of finance, to understand what the nuances is as trustees, what your responsibilities are, and when you want to build or grow or develop, then they can talk with me. And then I kind of navigate between all of these wonderful people trying to find lending institutions that actually understand churches and will lend to them so that they can continue with the mission. I have sat on numerous boards, including the Community League of the Heights and HCCI currently. And between those two, we have developed well over 5,000 low-income housing developments. In addition to that, or low-income units. In addition to that, we've also done a school. So we have the Community Health Academy of the Heights in Washington Heights. That's with cloth. And that was a wonderful thing because you see the development. All of the things that you've heard and will hear are the things that we're involved with. My background is as a lender, I've done this all over the country. And it is a challenge because churches oftentimes don't understand this whole system and this whole network of things. And so that's why I'm standing today, because I represent that other part that navigates these waters to help you do either the development or to buy or to sell or anything else that you need to do, navigating the Supreme Court as well as the Attorney General's office. It's a whole lot of stuff going in there. So now, having said all of that, now you know why I'm standing here. But it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce our next speaker, David Walsh is with J.P. Morgan Chase. Enough said. You know you know what they do. You know the kind of cash that they have. Now he's going to come and tell us how we can get it.
Thank you. My name is Dave Walsh. I work at J.P. Morgan Chase. I am the head of the East Coast region for J.P. Morgan Chase in the community development banking area. My background is actually how I got into affordable housing to start with. Is I actually worked at a nonprofit that developed housing for the homeless called Common Ground Community about 25 years ago here in the New York City market, and was lucky enough to develop about 1,000 units. So that was my first experience with understanding to develop affordable housing in the market. I since moved on to run New York State Housing Finance Agency, the multifamily lending programs for a period of 3 years during the financial crisis prior to coming to J.P. Morgan Chase. So I got to learn a little bit about how all the government programs work in collaboration for developers, and then ultimately moved over to Chase over 12 years ago. And you know, my background has principally been in public. I recognized when I was at the state about looking at a firm that was really committed to the mission of developing affordable housing across the country, and had done so for a long period of time, and that's how I ended up at J.P. Morgan Chase. So what is life like for us and my team every day? We look to partner with developers large and small in financing all different types. We also work with the tools we have to develop charter schools, we actually, I'm very proud of the fact that we financed the largest for-sale affordable co-op for Habitat for Humanity in the Bronx ever done in the country, 57 units at one time. It looks just like a traditional apartment building, but we financed that building together with Habitat and Almat Development. You know, when I look at what our primary mission is, it's to expand the access to capital. That's our job. It's to meet the needs of folks that have a site, have an idea. We partner people. We spend a lot of time connecting people because, believe it or not, there are some folks that are specialists in certain types of housing or community facilities or grocery stores or you name it, churches. Exactly. There's, you know, and we make those introductions, and because we're there with our balance sheet. That's what our job is. We're there to provide the financing necessary. Some of the things that we've done in addition to some of the affordable for sale that we focused on, we've got a big public housing initiative today. So we're working collaboratively with the New York City Housing Authority and developers, affordable housing developers, who are partnering with the New York City Housing Authority to redevelop a number of the large-scale developments across the city. And that program is only in its infancy stage, honestly. It's continuing to grow. And out of that, you're starting to see more sites become available. You're starting to see some different ideas being considered. This administration is really open-minded about what can we do. Land is a premium in New York, and it's hard to find. And they've got a great team down at the city right now trying to figure out, you know, how to do more with what we have. So, and that's another part of my job, which is spending quite a bit of time with both the state and city housing agencies, figuring out how we can leverage their resources and ours to meet the needs of the community. So that's principally what I do. We're delighted to be here today to be a sponsor of the event, and look forward to catching up with you, with some of you after the event. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Talk about the intersections. Actually, for me, Bridge Street Development is the first nonprofit that I've worked for. My background was over 30 years in public finance, investment banking, doing bond financings for New York State HFA, New York City HDC, bond financings around the country for charter schools, and really looking at how do we provide creative solutions for community development. And going back many years, it's really in our community, how do we create bankable deals. One of the first things I learned from one of my late mentors, he would always say, Anderson, how do the bonds get paid? So whether it's a bond or a bank loan, we need to have the discipline, the knowledge, the structures, because within our community, there is gold in them there hills. But we've got to be the ones to mine it. And there are lots of partners here to help us get that done. And so I'd like to introduce our next partner and panelist, Bishop Hugh Nelson, and I need my glasses. Church of God of East Flatbush, sir.
Good afternoon. Well, I should have want to acknowledge Pastor Dennis Dillon and the team, and grateful for the invitation. My name is Bishop R.C. Hugh Nelson, and just a disclaimer, I'm really a pastor. In the past few years, maybe 5 years, we have been involved in the development. I also wanted to share with you, because many times we come to these seminars and we may say, well, that doesn't apply. I don't have the capacity. Well, you don't know what God has for you around the corner. So I've been pastoring now for 19 years in Brooklyn, pastoring a congregation, and the issue was space. We had outgrown our space. We needed larger facilities, and we looked at several warehouses. Anything we saw that could accommodate our growing congregation was beyond our budget. But as I would drive to church, to the office on Linden, it just so happened, I looked over just beside or just behind, there were 4 city blocks for sale. And so as I would be driving into on Linden, somehow I would see the big placard advertising these properties. And I thought, no, I can't afford it. If we can barely afford to even look at these warehouses, development was out of the picture. Well, there's somehow God has a way of challenging us, even in our periods of fear. And many times we allow fear, we allow what we see to block what God has in store. And so one day I was actually preaching on Ephesians chapter 3 and 20. Now unto him who is able to do exceeding abundantly above all we can ask or think. And while I'm preaching, somehow I felt checked in my spirit that I was preaching something I didn't believe. And the Holy Spirit spoke to my heart. You really don't trust my ability. And so I thought, God, you know we can't afford that property. And so it's almost like, well, what do you have to lose? At least check it out. And so the next time I drove by, I got the number, I called the broker, I arranged a meeting with our trustees, shared this mission, this vision that we had to become an urban ministry center, which would provide ministry 7 days a week, 24 hours, and not just limited to worship services. And so the broker he seemed quite impressed. And after sitting for an hour talking about our vision, he said, would you like to speak to the owner? So I wasn't planning to speak to the owner, but I wasn't going to miss that opportunity. So he says, okay, come. We walked out his office, we go over to the next block, and walked into this room, and there are these 4 young Jewish guys, legs on the desk, looking all relaxed. They said, well, Bishop, how can we help you? So I says, we're wanting to build an urban ministry center that would provide ministry not only during worship services, but would also provide services for the community in Brownsville. And we talked, shared the vision. And so I said, I want 2 of the largest blocks. Now, don't ask me how I was going to pay for it. It was all faith talking. And so the more we talked, we settled down and we started looking at what would it cost to purchase the 2 largest city blocks. So I got on the phone with my lawyer, got on the phone with the CPA, and we began to look at comps. What would the price range be? And so we settled for $8.1 million. Now I need to go find a banker to help finance the deal. We were walking through the door where the guys called us. He said, Bishop, come back in. He says, we want to help you. I says, well, how can you help us? He said, we'll hold the mortgage for 5 years. And at the end of the 5 years, you have to move us from the table. So I called my lawyer, we talked about it, and then we decided, you know what, we don't have any funding, let's go with it. So they became my bank. I was the owner, but in truth, they remain my banker. And so we paid down $5 million, brought $3 million, brought the balance to $5 million. And although we had real estate of over $15 million, couldn't get a bank to finance $5 million. Then Mayor de Blasio came in, started running for office, talking about affordable housing. A group of pastors, Eric Adam as borough president, was instrumental in bringing pastors together, bankers, developers, in a space where we could speak about partnerships. Because many times as pastors, we think solo. We think within the context of our congregation. Well, in this season of connecting with bankers, developers, we begin to look at how can we build partnerships. Begin to do something even within our hearts, because God began to challenge us. He says, you've been planning for the church. He says, I want you to plan or to build for the community. So we had to now change our plans, and we begin to look at what are the needs in the community. Because most churches, we have the space to worship, but the question is, how does our presence raise the level, raise the welfare of the community? And so in that space, I shared with the board, shared with the congregation, I said, we need to build, not for ourselves, but we need to build to meet a need in the community. And so out of that space, I met Mr. Keller, Tom, who is the father of Ericka, and we discussed the project. After we did the financing and got and was able, as a matter of fact, God helped us to rezone the property because it was commercial. And so to build residential, we had to rezone from not just commercial, but commercial residential. Not realizing that the owners had tried 3 times to rezone and couldn't get it rezoned. We went once, and God gave us the approval, and once it was rezoned, the value went up an additional $5+ million. And so we could not have known that right after signing the agreement with Ericka's father, who was suffering from cancer. He passed, I think, 3 months afterwards. Well, we wanted to make sure right from the get-go that we work with a black developer. We wanted to make sure that the employment opportunities right in Brownsville. So to make a long story very short, we're presently building out a ministry space of 43,000 square footage and 530 apartments above. So that is way bigger than we had anticipated. But when you step out in faith, you may wonder, well, is it worth my time? You may be rubbing shoulders with a future partner who will help you to accomplish something you could never have done on your own. Have a blessed day.
You should be getting excited and the possibilities that exist. You know, there's an old book. It's a motivational book. Many of you have probably read it many, many times. It's been called the epitome of motivational books, called Think and Grow Rich. That if you can think about it, you can do it. But you have to let your mind go outside of the box. And so what you're hearing today is how you can extend your thinking and make your thinking a reality. And so it gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce to you from Goldstein Hall, PLLC, that's a private limited partnership agreement. They're actually professionals. They're attorneys. Yep. Jason Labate, right? Jason Labate, everyone.
All right, everyone's still awake with us? Yep. All right, I saw somebody wake up. Good. Attorneys are usually boring. I'm going to try and avoid doing that. Malik, so you can see my face, but I was a little shook. He's a legit star. I mean, before he even opened his mouth, but then everything that he said. And I hope everyone's picking up. There's a refrain. There are words that are being said again and again here, and a few that I want to underline. And one of them is community. And Reverend Dillon, wherever you are, I want to have a friendly amendment that perhaps it's the black church means business of community, right? Like if you are looking around this room and you're hearing the story and you're listening to the stories of development and how these development deals came together, it's about community. And another word that was mentioned was partners, right? You need partnerships. You can't do this alone. That's another word for community. And so I want to riff on, because if I'm going to riff on what Reverend Dillon has written, I'll riff on what Malik had mentioned. He said you need God and Google. Here and here is that you need a team that you can trust that's going to help you develop. In terms of being shook and community, I'm just going to take privilege. So I don't know if you all were listening, but Malik said that the property he bought and that he's developing with these students and giving the community the opportunity to invest in is 465 Hancock. We're talking about like God coming down. My wife grew up in the house 460A Hancock. I texted her and she's like, no, get out of town. I was like, no, for real, Malik just bought that house. And she grew up and community made her and her family what they are today. My wife is a pediatrician. She's an amazing woman, despite having married me. And the family was raised in that house. Not just her family, but generations were in that house. And unfortunately, they had to sell it in 2008. And so, and if everybody knows, Bed-Stuy, Harlem, other places in the community are being sold, and they're being sold to the highest bidder, and they're being rolled over and gentrified. And so next door of where that happened, where she grew up, to see Malik invest and make it community a property again, I mean, that is what we're here to do. I don't know what does. So, all right, let me get to very quickly about the few things that I wanted to say, and then I'll step down. Okay, so I am an attorney, not having said anything legal so far, but I will say the disclaimer, none of this is legal advice, it is just educational, and if you try to sue me, I'll say no backsies. It's not legal advice, this is just me talking. You should consult an attorney about your specific situation. Goldstein in existence for about 16 years. We worked on the Ebenezer Project. We work with BRISA. We are very proud to do so. We work in the areas of affordable housing and community development, and we work with minority women-owned businesses, and we work a lot with church and like the Ebenezer Project. And I got in this as a second career or a career pivot because I was focused on community development and economic empowerment. And I saw that there was a need to bring the expertise, particularly the legal expertise, to protect the community institutions and the real property that those institutions and individuals have to benefit the community. So I've been an attorney working in partnership with Goldstein Hall, in partnership with our clients for 10 years. So I just want to underline those points. We are here about community development and ownership, right? And that's part of what I think we're here to do. And so what I want to underline is the baseline for all of this, right? You can find through Google, God, and your gang the information you need to do development. But you've got to have vision, and you've got to have clarity on what you want and need. And so for our churches and for our business owners and our developers or would-be developers in the audience and supporters and participants, you need to know what it is that you want to bring to your community. Particularly, we work with churches, and they say, our congregation may have dwindled, but we are not leaving. Our building may be crumbling around us, but we are not leaving. So we need a deal that might bring affordable housing to the community or a school to the community or another benefit to the community, but we need our sanctuary and we need space for ourselves. And so you've got to hold on to that, and then you need a group around you, developer, owner's rep, architect, attorneys, that can tell you what's possible and what's not, and then it's up to you to decide whether you're going to accept whether that's possible or not. I'll say New York real estate is tough. It's complicated in general. It's even more complicated when it's affordable housing because you have to appease and fit into a lot of requirements. And religious corporations in particular have a lot of laws that they have to comply with. I won't go into them now, but you have attorney general and court approval that you'll need to get. Again, you'll need a good team to do that. The last thing I want to leave you with, besides saying that, my firm, Goldstein Hall, is here to help as much as we can. We gotta, as Malik said, it's about that money, but we gotta, we gotta keep our staff paid, but we try to be as generous as we can with sort of free advice from the outset, and we try to help find money for organizations that need it so that they can do the development. So to that end, I want to say you're welcome to come and speak to me or anyone at the firm. We've got a table in the back. But particularly for faith-based organizations, if you'll write this down, there's a group called Bricks and Mortals. It's a faith-based organization. It's grassroots, so its members are mostly churches, but it also brings together the real estate community, attorneys, led and directed by the faith community, and it's a not-for-profit. So if everybody please go check that out, it's there to provide a resource for you. Then there is a number of other resources for pre-development funds, pre-development funds for faith-based organizations, Enterprise, LISC, CPC, I'm sure will be able to help you all that, so I don't want to put words in his mouth. And a group called IAHC. Anyway, Bricks and Mortals can hook you up to all of them, and it can certainly help faith-based organizations explore community development, affordable housing, and really make sure that you remain in the community, serve the community, work with the community, and create a...
Thank you, Jason. That I think are important for us to always remember. The bishop referenced fear. And it's the biggest block that we have no matter what we do. And I collect quotes and sayings, and the two things that I heard about fear is, I heard someone say, when I have fear, I give my fear to God, and I go about my business. And I've always tried to remember that, because fear gets in the way. Fear prevents us from giving someone else the opportunity to even say no, because we've already said it to ourselves by not taking the action. And then the other thing I heard about fear is, I think there's a version of it, but I heard someone say there are two dogs, the fear dog and the faith dog. And whichever one we feed is the one that grows. So we need to ask ourselves, which dog are we feeding today? So, and then the other thing that Jason touched on that Malik also referenced was the and work together. None of this can be done alone. In Bridge Street, everything we do is through partnerships and collaborations. As we speak and as we stand here, Bridge Street is looking to close on an additional loan, HPD, ANCP, Affordable Neighborhood Cooperative Program. These are taking low-income residents from rental to home ownership. So we're not just rehabilitating the buildings. These residents have gone through training to learn what does it mean, what's required to run a co-op, to be an owner. We do financial literacy training from our youth to our seniors. We have a first-time investors program that we've done with Signature Bank, and currently someone takes the program, they learn about the market, and they invest $500, Signature puts down $1,000. This program we've done with Signature for 19 years, primarily with Bedford-Stuyvesant residents. Over those years, the remaining participants have amassed over close to $500,000. There are about 200 participants, and that's another way of closing the racial wealth gap. So we're looking to, but I want to introduce that ANCP project that I just referenced. We're doing a loan closing next week, knock on wood. Goldstein Hall are our attorneys. And what Jason mentioned, when I was in public finance, is because I knew the minute the phone rang, the meter was ticking. With Goldstein Hall, with Jason's firm, I call them whenever I need help. And it works out. I'm not worried about how much is this costing me. I get the help that I need. On this ANCP project, the lender is Community Preservation Corporation. And when we did the initial closing, Lawrence was our primary loan officer before he got his new title and new program that I need to follow up with him on. But I did not know till this morning when I looked at this that the brother that was so helpful to us in closing that initial loan was not just Lawrence Hammond, but Reverend Lawrence Hammond. And it just blew me away, you know? And it just shows, you know, we need to remember from where our strength comes. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over. We saved the best for last. Reverend Lawrence Hammond.
Appreciate those kind words. And so, you know, oftentimes you don't know that, you know, there are saints in Caesar's household. And I get that from Reverend Youngblood. I remember a Labor Day service I went to, and he preached a sermon about saints in Caesar's household and how, you know, God has strategically situated us in the household in order that we might be able to bring forth some engagement within the households. And so I work for Community Preservation Corporation. As you all may have known, I've been up here a few times already today, but I appreciate the opportunity. And as Greg was saying, I was the loan officer at the time on the project with Bridge Street. And you know, CPC, we've often been the lender of choice, especially on more difficult transactions, especially with developers who are new to the development game. Oftentimes, working especially with BIPOC developers, they tend to work on some of the most difficult projects in the most difficult neighborhoods. And so right there, you have sort of an inherent impediment that has been created, but yet you need lenders of choice. And I worked for many years at JP Morgan Chase. That's where I cut my teeth, and I spent 28 years at JP Morgan Chase. I owe a lot to Chase in helping to groom me to be the lender and that I am. But I also spent a number of years in the community of faith. And I serve also now as the chairman of the Board of Trustees at New York Theological Seminary. I have both a master's and a doctorate. And so God has strategically allowed me to be in a place that I can now, in this stage of my career, to continue to give back. And so we work with developers, and oftentimes we're that family and friend network. Black developers don't have that family and friend network that majority developers have. One that will be patient with you. We talk about patient capital, that pre-development capital. I was speaking with a faith leader recently, and I said, you know, like, what do you really need? And I call it vision capital. It's that capital even before you get to pre-development. You have a concept, you have a vision, but you don't have anybody that believes in that vision. And so you need some folk that will come along that will give you some of that seed money. And so, you know, I'm working now. I have a platform at CPC where I have dollars that have been given to me to put out into the community. We work alongside our lending teams. We're doing significant work all throughout the state. We are part of a program in upper New York State, the western region they call it, the central region. I'm learning, I'm a city boy, but I'm learning all about other parts called Legacy City Access, where there are legacy city communities, Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse, Kingston, and they have land banks that own property. And now these land banks are looking to dispose of those properties to develop in those distressed communities. And so we've partnered with HCR, which is the state's housing agency, Home and Community Renewal, to create opportunities to identify who will in fact partner with land banks. And therefore, it will create an opportunity for these BIPOC developers to develop clusters of 1 and 2 family homes, which will in turn be sold to first-time home buyers with the preference going to Black and brown homeowners within those communities. So it's a holistic approach at trying to create opportunities for home ownership through community stakeholders and the costs. You know, construction costs, whether you're building, is there. And so you need subsidy dollars that will help to offset the cost of construction, which then makes homes affordable. So it's this partnership that is created through both state and private and public dollars that helps to bring. So that's just one example of some of the work that we're doing throughout the state. We're looking at other ways that we can be collaborative with other financing sources to be instrumental. It's all about collaboration. And so, you know, with our other like-minded CDFI partners, we have actually a fund with True Fund, which you mentioned. They're a CDFI that focuses on small business, and we focus on real estate lending. And so we brought the two entities, capacity building capital to emerging developers. So we have a $6 million fund that we each put $3 million in, and we're identifying emerging developers that we can provide them with working capital or lines of credit. And so, you know, we're being innovative and creative around how we can continue to bring resources to the BIPOC community. And so I'm just grateful for this opportunity, Reverend Mann and Reverend Dillon, and to all my other colleagues. We all have worked together in various ways, Ericka, and looking for just continued opportunity to just be who God has called us to be for this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend. I like that. That's nice. It fits him well. I don't want to restate anything that's been said because everyone spoke for themselves and they spoke well. So what we want to do is give you an opportunity to ask whatever questions you might have of our panelists and see whether or not they can unpack something for you, make something clear for you, and we'll spend just a few moments doing that, and then we will be done. Now, I'm going to ask you again, if you want to ask a question, please step out to the side. We will bring you a microphone so that you may do that. So if there's any questions, we'd like to take those at this time. That side. Okay.
As a minority business as well as a veteran.
Standing next to my speaker, move away.
As a veteran, do you have those same kind of funds available for a startup in that industry as well?
Anybody want to answer that?
So Small Business Services, New York City, they have several programs for minority. I think the next panel will have someone possibly from Small Business Services. SBS is the acronym. Dinah Shaw Gross, I believe, is here. And so she definitely will assist you in the different programs and funding opportunities that are available.
Thank you so much.
Yes. May I please have a card from everybody?
I like that question. Come on, Doctor.
Questions?
I tell you what, why don't you put your information on it? We'll share it with everybody, and then this way we'll make sure that they get it to you. And if they don't, let us know.
Any other questions?
You want their information? All right, so what we'll do is this. Why don't you, we'll pass the sheet around, put your information on it, and we'll make sure that they all get it. And what we'll do is we'll simply do it technologically. We'll take a picture of it and send it to them. All right, that's fair? All right. So please, the list is going around. Dr. Youngblood has it.
Hey, Doc.
He's good at, his reputation precedes him. That didn't surprise me at all. Yes, ma'am, you have a question? Anyone? I saw someone else standing in the back. I don't know if she has. Do you have a question, sis?
Where?
In the back to the left. She sat down again, so I don't know if she has a question. I don't think so. Are there any other questions? Any questions?
Raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic.
And then I'll let my co-moderator say it for himself. I want to thank you for the opportunity that you have given me to share with you this afternoon, acting not as a voice of information, but just as someone who moderates and directs you to the point of information. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Reverend Dylan, was like in 1985. I've known him for a very long time. The black church means business, and we have to continue to push that envelope, because if we don't, we'll miss the mark. And those of you who are church, those of you who understand anything about theology, know what happens when you miss the mark. That's the archery term for sin. Don't miss the mark. Make sure that you're doing and getting what you need so that you can take care of the people that God has called you to serve. If you don't do that, shame on you. Shame on you. Their blood is on your hands. You now know better. And those of us who know better are charged to do better. If you don't, the blood is on your hands. My co-moderator.
Thank you. I'm just going to and Reverend Mans for bringing us all together. But I also want to pick up on something that the bishop said this morning. And I had to catch him saying, what was that, Bishop? Wheel and come again. We can't wait till next year, Resurgence 2024, to come again. Here's meeting. What are we doing next week? Every time I see Ericka, we got to get together. So after Thanksgiving, we're going to get together, because this is how we make it happen. We come together, we share ideas, we share problems, we find solutions together. So we'll and come again. So we'll come again tomorrow. I look forward to seeing you all then.